The Araxian embassy gleamed like a polished diamond against the black velvet of space, its crystalline spires reaching toward distant stars. Orbital Station Meridian 7 rotated slowly, bringing the Earthside viewports into alignment with the azure planet below. Inside the Grand Diplomatic Hall, attendants scurried about, making final preparations for what was supposed to be a routine diplomatic exchange. Ambassador Solara of Araxia adjusted her ceremonial vestments, iridescent fabrics cascading in precise folds according to tradition. Her four-fingered hands moved with practiced efficiency, ensuring every pleat and fold adhered to the exacting standards of her people. The translucent membrane across her violet eyes flickered, a sign of anticipation among Araxians. "The human delegation approaches, Your Eminence," announced Prelate Kiev, her chief of protocol. Solara nodded curtly. "Remind the staff, no deviations from ceremony today. The Treaty of Meridian negotiations enter Phase 3 tomorrow, and we cannot afford another human formality." "Of course, Your Eminence, though I must inform you," Kiev hesitated, mandibles clicking nervously. "The human consul is bringing his offspring to the proceedings." Solara's membrane flashed opaque for a moment, an unmistakable sign of irritation. "Typical. They integrate their larvae into every aspect of life, even diplomatic functions. Prepare additional seating, but ensure the gift exchange follows protocol precisely." The great doors parted, revealing the human delegation. At its head stood Consul Marcus Hale, a tall man with deep brown skin and silver-flecked hair that betrayed his 50 Earth years. His formal attire, a blend of traditional human diplomatic vestments with subtle integration of Araxian color patterns, spoke of careful cultural consideration. But beside him, and here Solara's inner eyelids narrowed perceptibly, walked a small human child. The girl couldn't have been more than 10 Earth years, with her father's complexion and a cascade of tightly coiled hair adorned with small, twinkling lights that mimicked the stars outside. She wore a miniature version of formal diplomatic attire, complete with the insignia of Earth's diplomatic corps. "Ambassador Solara." Marcus bowed precisely to the depth required by Araxian custom, neither too shallow to suggest disrespect nor too deep to imply subservience. "On behalf of Earth's diplomatic corps and the United Planetary Alliance, I extend greetings and goodwill. May I present my daughter, Lena Hale, Junior Ambassador in Training." The child stepped forward with remarkable composure and executed a bow that, while technically correct, carried the slight wobble of youth. "Ambassador Solara, I am honored to meet you and learn of Araxian ways," she said, her practiced words carrying the sing-song quality of memorization. Solara inclined her head precisely 4 degrees, the minimum acknowledgement permissible without causing offense. "Consul Hale, Earth's innovative approach to diplomatic training is noted. We welcome your delegation to Meridian 7 and the sovereign territory of the Araxian hegemony." If Marcus noticed the cool reception, he showed no sign. "We bring gifts in the tradition of both our peoples," he said, gesturing to an aide who stepped forward with a hovering tray. The ceremonial exchange of gifts was a cornerstone of Araxian diplomatic protocol, not mere tokens but symbols laden with meaning that would set the tone for negotiations. Marcus lifted a translucent cube from the tray, within which floated what appeared to be a small earth tree, its roots suspended in a nutrient gel. A bonsai oak, over 200 Earth years old, cultivated by my great-grandmother's hands and passed through generations of my family. Its resilience through centuries symbolizes our hope for lasting relations between our peoples. Murmurs rippled through the Araxian delegation. The gift was unexpectedly appropriate, acknowledging both Araxian reverence for living antiquities and their cultural emphasis on lineage. Solara herself seemed momentarily taken aback before composing her features. "We accept this living testament with appropriate honor," she said, gesturing for her own aide to step forward. The Araxian carried a crystalline pedestal upon which rested what appeared to be a sculpture of intertwined geometrical forms. except the form shifted subtly, pulsing with inner light. The hegemony presents a fifth-generation luminous crystal seeded from the royal gardens of Arax Prime. For 900 cycles, it has absorbed the thoughts of our greatest philosophers. It responds to emotional harmonies and grows in the presence of enlightened discourse. Marcus's eyes widened slightly. Such crystals were rarely gifted outside the Araxian nobility. "We are deeply honored by such a treasure," he said, genuinely moved. He gestured for the aide to take the crystal. It was at this precise moment that the gravity generators of Meridian 7 experienced one of their periodic fluctuations, a millisecond hiccup that would have gone unnoticed during normal activities. But as the crystal was being transferred, young Lena, who had been standing perfectly still with admirable patience, lost her balance. She stumbled forward, her small hand instinctively reaching out to steady herself. Her fingers brushed against the living crystal just as the Araxian aide was withdrawing. Time seemed to slow as the crystal tipped, fell, and shattered against the polished floor of the embassy. The sound was unlike ordinary breaking glass, a keening, almost musical cry that resonated through the hall. Fragments scattered, each still glowing but now pulsing erratically, like dying heartbeats. Silence fell like a guillotine. Lena stood frozen, horror etched across her young face. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, eyes wide with genuine remorse. "I didn't mean—" The movement was so swift that few saw it happen. Ambassador Solara, consumed by centuries of cultural conditioning and the shock of seeing a priceless heirloom destroyed, lashed out. Her four-fingered hand struck Lena's cheek with a sharp crack that echoed through the stunned silence. The child's head snapped to the side, her small body staggering backward from the force of the blow. A red mark bloomed instantly on her brown cheek. For 3 heartbeats, no one moved. Then, several things happened simultaneously. Major Elena Ortiz, chief of the human security detail, touched her comm unit and spoke a single phrase, "Amber Alert." Throughout the station, subtle alarm patterns began to pulse. Not the blaring emergency sirens that might incite panic, but a distinct rhythm recognized by all human personnel. Consul Marcus Hale moved to his daughter, kneeling beside her with remarkable composure. His face betrayed no anger, only focused concern as he gently touched her reddened cheek. "Are you hurt, Lena?" he asked quietly. The girl's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but she shook her head. "I'm okay, Dad," she whispered. "I really didn't mean to break it." "I know, sweetheart." He stood, keeping one hand protectively on his daughter's shoulder, and faced Ambassador Solara. His expression remained diplomatic, betraying nothing of what must have been roiling beneath. "Ambassador," he said, his voice steady, "I understand the cultural significance of what has been lost. My daughter's action was accidental, but we take full responsibility for the damage to the crystal. However," and here his tone shifted almost imperceptibly, "I must formally notify you that you have struck a minor child under the protection of Earth's diplomatic course. This constitutes a Class 1 violation under the Treaty of Meridian. Section 12, regarding the physical safety of diplomatic dependents." Ambassador Solara's composure had returned, though her membrane flickered rapidly. "The Treaty of Meridian has not yet been ratified, Consul, and you bring an untrained larva to a formal diplomatic exchange. The basic protections were established in the preliminary accords signed 83 days ago." Marcus interrupted smoothly. "Those protections specifically include diplomatic immunity and physical safety guarantees for all members of diplomatic missions, including minor dependents. I believe your own first counselor Zeth was the signatory." Throughout the exchange, the subtle alarm pattern continued to pulse. Human staff had begun to move with quiet efficiency, taking positions near exits and communication stations. Prelate Kiv leaned close to Solara, whispering urgently, "Your Eminence, Our systems indicate unusual activity at the edge of the system. Multiple energy signatures consistent with human warships have appeared. Solara's eyes widened slightly. Impossible. Their patrol fleet is scheduled in the outer rim sectors. Marcus continued as if he hadn't noticed the whispered exchange. Ambassador, I am formally invoking Section 12, Paragraph 7 of the Preliminary Accords. We will be withdrawing to Earth diplomatic quarters, pending investigation and resolution of this incident. You cannot possibly, Solara began, but she was interrupted by a communication chime. Priority transmission from Earth Fleet Command, announced the station's automated system. Addressed to all diplomatic personnel. The main view screen activated without waiting for permission, revealing a human woman in the dark blue uniform of Earth's Fleet Command. Her resemblance to Marcus was unmistakable. The same deep brown skin, the same composed expression, though her hair was cropped short against her skull. This is Admiral Rachel Hale of the Earth vessel Lionheart, she announced without preamble. We have received an Amber Alert from Meridian 7 and have responded according to family protection protocols. I am informing all parties that the Lionheart and accompanying vessels have established a security perimeter around Meridian 7. No ships will depart or approach without direct clearance from Fleet Command. Solara's composure finally cracked. This is an outrageous overreaction, a minor cultural misunderstanding. The strike of a child is not recognized as a cultural expression under any interspecies accord. Admiral Hale cut in, her voice like steel wrapped in velvet. Ambassador, I am officially notifying you that 42 Family Guard vessels have decloaked at strategic positions throughout this system. They will remain in place until this situation is resolved to our satisfaction. Murmurs of alarm spread through both delegations. The Family Guard was not a publicly acknowledged branch of Earth's military, more rumor than confirmed fact in diplomatic circles. Consul, Admiral Hale continued, her gaze shifting to her brother. Is my niece unharmed? Minor physical impact only. Admiral, Marcus replied formally. No medical intervention required at this time. Understood. Fleet Command stands ready to implement Article 42 if necessary. The screen went dark, leaving a charged silence in its wake. Solara turned to Marcus, her voice low and urgent. What is Article 42? There is no such provision in any treaty we've negotiated. Marcus met her gaze steadily. It's not a diplomatic article. Ambassador, it's a Fleet Command directive regarding kinetic response to threats against human dependence. The implicit threat hung in the air between them. This is absurd, Solara hissed. One does not bring the full might of a military fleet to bear over a single disciplinary action toward a child. Humans do, Marcus said simply. Now, we will withdraw to our quarters while you consult with your government. I suggest you move quickly. Ambassador, the Family Guard operates on a strict timeline in these matters. As if to emphasize his point, the subtle alarm pattern changed its rhythm slightly. 2 minutes until diplomatic withdrawal completion, Major Ortiz announced calmly. 90 seconds until secure communication blackout. The human delegation began an orderly evacuation, security personnel forming a protective cordon around Lena. The child looked back once at the shattered crystal, her expression troubled despite her father's reassuring hand on her shoulder. Ambassador, Marcus said as he reached the door, I truly regret that our cultural exchange has taken this turn. I hope wisdom prevails in your consultations. Then they were gone, leaving Solara standing amid the glittering fragments of the living crystal, facing the most significant diplomatic crisis of her career. The emergency session of the Araxian High Council convened virtually within 15 minutes of the incident. Solara stood before the projected images of 7 of the most powerful individuals in the hegemony, their features set in expressions ranging from concern to outright anger. Explain yourself, Ambassador, First Counselor Zeth demanded without preamble. How has a gift exchange resulted in a human battle fleet surrounding one of our most important diplomatic outposts? Solara fought to maintain composure. The human child damaged a fifth-generation crystal through carelessness. I responded with appropriate correction, as would be expected with any unruly offspring. The humans have grossly overreacted. You struck a human child? Counselor Threv interrupted, leaning forward so that his aged face filled more of the projection. Physically? A minor corrective gesture only, Solara insisted. Their cultural hypersensitivity, their cultural norms regarding their young are well documented. Threv cut in again. Ambassador, did you review the preliminary briefings on human family structures before this meeting? Solara's membrane flickered in irritation. Of course, but then you would have noted Section 47, which explicitly states, physical discipline of human offspring by non-family members is strictly prohibited and may provoke extreme defensive responses. Was this section unclear? Before Solara could respond, First Counselor Szeth raised a hand for silence. The historical context matters little now. What matters is the fleet of warships currently surrounding Meridian 7. Ambassador, what do you know of this family guard the human admiral mentioned? Solara hesitated. Very little. First Counselor, it appears to be a specialized branch of their military, possibly covert in nature. Our intelligence suggested that Admiral Hale had retired from active service 3 Earth years ago. Evidently not, Szeth said dryly. Military intelligence is accessing all available data now. In the meantime, what of this Article 42 they referenced? Unknown. First Counselor, the Consul implied it involved some form of kinetic response. Counselor Threv made a gesture of dismay. It would be consistent with their historical patterns. Humans have always maintained an extreme protective stance regarding their young. During the Proxima incident 80 years ago, they bombarded an entire moon after colonists there harmed human children during a territorial dispute. Surely they wouldn't, Solara began. They would, came a new voice. The projection shifted to include General Kraz of military intelligence. First Counselor, we have accessed limited information on the Human Family Guard. It appears to be a special division comprised entirely of adult humans with familial connections to diplomatic personnel. In essence, they are a fleet operated by the parents, siblings, and extended family members of their diplomats. Silence greeted this revelation. You mean to tell me, Szeth said slowly, that the warships surrounding our embassy are crewed by the relatives of their diplomatic corps? Precisely. First Counselor, Admiral Hale is Consul Hale's sister and the child's aunt. Our scans indicate that the 42 vessels now in position around Meridian 7 are commanded almost exclusively by individuals with direct blood or legal familial ties to human diplomatic personnel currently serving throughout known space. Ancestors, preserve us, murmured Counselor Vril, who had been silent until now. We're not facing a standard military response. We're facing an entire fleet of enraged human parents and relatives. What of this Article 42, Szeth pressed. General Kraz's expression grew grave. We've managed to access a fragment of their military codex. Article 42 appears to be what they term a non-negotiable response protocol. In essence, if diplomatic resolution fails within a specified time frame, they are authorized to extract their personnel by any means necessary, with full suspension of normal rules of engagement. They would start a war over one child? Solara asked incredulously. Ambassador, Threv said quietly, have you not studied Earth history at all? They have started wars over far less when their offspring were threatened. First Counselor Szeth's expression had turned calculating. General, what is our military position at Meridian 7? Inadequate for the current threat. First Counselor, came the blunt reply. The station's defenses were designed for piracy deterrence, not to withstand a concentrated assault from capital ships. The nearest hegemony battle group is 3 days away at maximum speed. And the human fleet? Their weapons are powered and targeting systems active, but not yet locked. They maintain a defensive posture at present. However, our analysis suggests they could reduce the station's military capabilities to 0 within 90 seconds if they choose to attack. Szeth was silent for a long moment. What do they want, Ambassador? Have they made specific demands? Solara shook her head. Only that we resolve the situation to their satisfaction. They've withdrawn to their diplomatic quarters and implemented a communication blackout. We have less than 1 hour before their timeline expires, whatever that means. It means, Threv said grimly, that we have less than 1 hour before those ships open fire. Impossible, Solara protested. Even humans wouldn't risk interstellar war over... Ambassador, Szeth interrupted sharply. Your assessment of human behavior has proven dangerously inaccurate thus far. I suggest you defer to those with greater expertise. He turned his attention back to the full council. Options. We must invoke the arbitration clauses of the preliminary accords, Threv said immediately. Request neutral mediation from the Galactic Concord. There's no time, General Kraz countered. The nearest Concord representative is days away. Then we must offer immediate reparations. Councillor Vril suggested. Full acknowledgement of error, formal apology, cultural exchange programs, whatever they demand. And set a precedent that the hegemony can be coerced by military threats, objected Councillor Marath, speaking for the first time. Unacceptable. More unacceptable than the alternative, Threv challenged. Meridian 7 houses over 12,000 Araxian citizens, not to mention the station itself, which represents decades of engineering and resources. First Councillor Szeth raised his hand again, calling for silence. We need more information about their expectations. Ambassador, you must re-establish communication with the human consul. They've implemented a blackout, Solara reminded him. Then break it, Szeth said flatly. Use emergency channels, station overrides, whatever means necessary. Find out what they want, specifically, to resolve this situation. As the council continued to debate, Solara withdrew to implement the first councillor's orders. Her mind raced with implications and possibilities, none of them favorable to her career or the hegemony's diplomatic position. How had a simple disciplinary gesture escalated so catastrophically? In the secure Earth diplomatic quarters, Consul Marcus Hale sat beside his daughter as a medical officer completed her examination. Just a bruise, sir, the officer reported. No serious tissue damage. I've applied a regenerative compound that should reduce swelling and discoloration within a few hours. Thank you, Dr. Maxwell, Marcus said with a nod of dismissal. When they were alone, he turned to Lena. How are you feeling, sweetheart? The girl's composure had mostly returned, though her eyes remained troubled. I'm okay, Dad. It doesn't hurt much now. She hesitated. Are we in trouble? I heard Major Ortiz talking about warships. Marcus smiled gently. No, we're not in trouble. Your Aunt Rachel is just being protective. It's what family does. But I did break their crystal, Lena said, her voice small. It was an accident, but it was still my fault. Maybe I shouldn't have come to the meeting. Lena, look at me, Marcus said firmly. Accidents happen in diplomacy, just like anywhere else. What matters is how we respond to them. The ambassador chose to respond with violence, and that's never acceptable, especially toward a child. Even if I messed up, even then, that's something the Araxians need to understand if we're going to have peaceful relations moving forward. He squeezed her shoulder gently. And you absolutely should have been there. You're training to be a diplomat, and today you're learning one of the most important diplomatic lessons of all. What's that? That sometimes the most important negotiations happen after things go wrong, not when everything's going right. Their conversation was interrupted by Major Ortiz. Consul, we're receiving an emergency transmission from the Araxian ambassador. She's bypassing our communication blackout using station override protocols. Marcus raised an eyebrow. That's a serious breach of diplomatic quarantine. Yes, sir. However, she's invoking emergency consultation provisions. Fleet Command is asking how you want to proceed. Marcus considered for a moment. Tell the Lionheart we'll accept the communication but maintain combat readiness. Let's see what the ambassador has to say. Moments later, Solara's image appeared on the view screen in Marcus's office. Her usual composure seemed strained, the membrane over her eyes flickering rapidly. Consul Hale, she began formally. The High Council of the Araxian Hegemony requests immediate clarification of human expectations regarding resolution of our diplomatic irregularity. Marcus's expression remained neutral. Ambassador, you struck my child. In human terms, that's considerably more than an irregularity. Cultural misunderstandings are inevitable in interspecies relations, Solara said stiffly. Surely we can reach an accommodation without military escalation. I'm listening, Ambassador. Solara hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with her position. The hegemony is prepared to offer formal apologies and cultural sensitivity training for all diplomatic personnel. We would also consider compensation for any distress caused. I see, Marcus said quietly. And you, personally, Ambassador, what are you prepared to offer? The question seemed to catch Solara off guard. I would naturally issue a formal apology as representative of the hegemony. Not good enough, came a new voice. Admiral Rachel Hale stepped into view beside her brother. Your hand struck my niece. Your personal accountability is non-negotiable. Solara's composure slipped further. What would satisfy you then? My resignation over one disciplinary error? For a start, Rachel said coldly, along with a public acknowledgement of wrongdoing and your personal pledge to support the implementation of universal child protection protocols in all diplomatic engagements moving forward. You cannot dictate internal Araxian diplomatic appointments. We're not, Marcus interjected, his tone more conciliatory than his sister's. The hegemony may appoint whoever they wish as ambassador. We are simply stating that our fleet will remain in place until we are satisfied with the resolution, which includes appropriate personal accountability. Solara's eyes narrowed. This is coercion. This is consequence, Rachel corrected. You struck a human child under diplomatic protection. In many human cultures throughout history, that alone would have been considered an act of war. Marcus raised a hand, silently asking his sister to let him speak. Ambassador, we don't want war. We want understanding. The Treaty of Meridian represents an opportunity for both our peoples to forge lasting peace, but that peace must be founded on mutual respect, including respect for our most fundamental values. The protection of children is non-negotiable for humans. I am beginning to understand that, Solara said stiffly. Then understand this as well. We require your personal accountability. Universal protection protocols for diplomatic dependents of all species, and a formal amendment to the Treaty of Meridian enshrining those protections. Meet these requirements, and the family guard will withdraw immediately. Solara was silent for a long moment. I must consult with the High Council. Of course, Marcus said. You have 30 minutes before our timeline expires. The communication ended, leaving Solara staring at a blank screen, the implications of the human demands echoing in her mind. The emergency session of the High Council had continued in her absence, with military and diplomatic advisors joining the virtual gathering. When Solara reported the human demands, reactions were mixed. Unacceptable, Councillor Marath declared immediately. We cannot allow humans to dictate our diplomatic appointments or treaty terms under threat of military action. The alternative being what? Exactly, Threv countered. Shall we sacrifice Meridian 7 and potentially trigger interstellar war over Ambassador Solara's career? The treaty amendments they propose are not unreasonable. Councillor Vril noted, universal protection for diplomatic dependents would benefit Araxian offspring as well. First Councillor Zeth had remained silent, his expression thoughtful. Now he focused on Solara. Ambassador, setting aside the political implications, I must ask, do you believe your action was justified? The question caught Solara by surprise. She had expected debate over sovereignty and negotiation strategy, not a moral inquiry. I acted according to Araxian custom, she said carefully. Among our people, physical correction of disruptive offspring is standard practice. That was not my question, Zeth said quietly. Do you, personally, believe striking the human child was justified? Solara found herself unexpectedly conflicted. The certainty she had felt in that moment of anger had been eroded by the hours since, replaced by a growing unease. The child destroyed a priceless cultural artifact. Accidentally, Threv interjected. But perhaps my response was disproportionate, Solara admitted reluctantly. I was not aware of the depth of human feeling regarding physical discipline. Then you acknowledge error? Zeth pressed. After a long moment, Solara inclined her head. I do. First Counselor. Then the path forward is clear, Zeth declared. Ambassador Solara will issue a personal apology and tender her resignation. The hegemony will agree to the treaty amendments regarding universal protection for diplomatic dependents. We will transform this crisis into an opportunity for improved relations. And who will replace Ambassador Solara? Councillor Marath demanded. I recommend Solarian, Threv said immediately. He has extensive experience with human cultural norms from his time on Earth and has advocated for more adaptable diplomatic protocols. Discussion continued, but the outcome was effectively decided, with minutes to spare before the human deadline expired. Solara found herself once again facing Consul Hale via view screen, this time with First Councillor Zeth visible beside her. Consul Hale, Zeth began formally. The High Council has considered your terms and finds them acceptable in principle. Ambassador Solara wishes to address you directly. Solara stepped forward, her posture rigid but her voice steady. Consul Hale, I formally apologize for my action toward your daughter. It was inappropriate and contrary to the spirit of mutual respect our peoples are striving to establish. I have tendered my resignation as ambassador to Earth, effective immediately. Marcus nodded solemnly. The apology is accepted. Ambassador, I appreciate your willingness to take personal responsibility. Furthermore, Zeth continued, the hegemony agrees to propose universal protection protocols for diplomatic dependents as an amendment to the Treaty of Meridian. We see this as an opportunity to establish new standards that will benefit all species in their interstellar relations. Excellent, Marcus replied. I believe we have the foundation for resolution. Admiral. Rachel Hale, who had been standing silently beside her brother, gave a curt nod. Upon formal implementation of these agreements, the family guard will stand down. However, the Lionheart will remain in orbit around Meridian 7 until the new ambassador arrives and diplomatic relations are fully normalized. Acceptable, Zeth said. We will appoint Ambassador-designate Solarian within the day. He will arrive at Meridian 7 within the week. Then we have an accord, Marcus concluded. I suggest a formal ceremony to re-establish diplomatic relations once Ambassador-designate Solarian arrives. Perhaps a more informal exchange of cultural perspectives. Indeed, Zeth agreed, with what might have been the Araxian equivalent of a wry smile. I believe we have all learned valuable lessons about the importance of cultural understanding today. As the communication ended, Solara felt a complex mixture of emotions, shame at her error, relief at the resolution, and a surprising sense of liberation. Perhaps her diplomatic career was ending, but she had prevented what could have escalated into interstellar conflict. You have served the hegemony well today, Solara, Zeth said quietly when they were alone. Few have the courage to acknowledge personal error at such cost. The cost to my career is nothing compared to what might have been. Solara replied. I have studied humans for years, yet failed to truly understand their most fundamental values. There is a lesson in that for all of us. Indeed, Zeth agreed. A lesson we will ensure is not forgotten. 6 months later, the grand hall of the Araxian embassy on Meridian 7 was once again filled with both human and Araxian dignitaries, though the atmosphere could not have been more different from that fateful day. Ambassador Solarian, a younger Araxian with a reputation for progressive thinking, stood beside Consul Marcus Hale as they prepared to formally sign the Treaty of Meridian, complete with its new amendments, most notably the Universal Child Safeguard Accord that had been adopted not just by Araxians and humans, but by all 17 species of the Galactic Concord. Lena Hale, now officially recognized as a junior ambassador in her own right, approached the signing table with a small crystalline box. Ambassador Solarian, she said with perfect composure, on behalf of Earth's Diplomatic Corps' Youth Division, I present this gift as a symbol of our renewed friendship. She opened the box to reveal a small, glowing crystal, similar to the one that had been shattered, but with subtle differences in its geometric patterns. A 7th-generation luminous crystal, Solarian identified with evident surprise. These are extraordinarily rare, even on Arax Prime. My aunt helped arrange it, Lena explained with a small smile. Admiral Hale felt it was important to replace what was lost, even though the treaty now recognizes that objects, no matter how precious, are never more valuable than people. Solarian carefully lifted the crystal, which pulsed with warm light in response to his touch. Your aunt is as formidable in peace as she is in potential conflict, he observed. We have established a most productive dialogue with the family guard in recent months. Marcus chuckled. Rachel has always believed that the best diplomacy is backed by unmistakable clarity about one's priorities. In this case, the priority was ensuring that all diplomatic children, human, Araxian, and others, enjoy the same protections throughout known space. A worthy priority, Solarian agreed, and one that has transformed an unfortunate incident into a new era of interspecies understanding. He gestured to where a group of Araxian offspring were engaged in animated conversation with human children, a cultural exchange program that had been one of the first initiatives under the new treaty. I've been learning Araxian philosophical meditation, Lena told Solarian enthusiastically. And I've been teaching my Araxian friends about Earth music. We're going to give a joint performance next month. Excellent, Solarian approved. Cultural exchange at your age builds understanding that formal diplomacy can only aspire to achieve. As they moved to the signing table, Solara watched from the edges of the gathering. She had returned to Arax Prime after her resignation, expecting to fade into obscurity. Instead, she had found herself appointed to the newly created Council for Interspecies Cultural Education, a position that allowed her to transform her diplomatic failure into a platform for preventing similar misunderstandings in the future. Former Ambassador, a voice greeted her, and she turned to find Consul Hale standing nearby. I'm pleased you could attend today. Consul, she acknowledged with a formal gesture of respect. I would not miss the culmination of what my error set in motion. Marcus smiled slightly. In diplomacy, we often find that our greatest achievements arise from our most difficult moments. The Child Safeguard Accord may prove to be the most significant advancement in interspecies relations in a generation. Perhaps, Solara agreed, though I would have preferred to achieve it without striking your daughter. As would I, Marcus said dryly. But Lena has proven remarkably resilient. In fact, she specifically asked that you be invited today. She wanted you to see what grew from that moment. Before Solara could respond, Lena herself approached, carrying a small data crystal. Former Ambassador Solara, she said with a formal bow, I brought something for you. Solara, accepted the crystal with surprise. "What is this? Young diplomat?" "My thesis project for diplomatic training," Lena explained. "It's called Transformative Conflict, How Crisis Creates Opportunity in Interspecies Relations." I used our experience as the central case study. Solara's membrane flickered in what humans had learned to recognize as an expression of astonishment. "You've made our encounter into an academic study." "Yes, ma'am," Lena said seriously. "Because it shows something really important, that even when we make big mistakes with each other, we can build something better if we're willing to take responsibility and change." Solara studied the human child, no longer quite so childlike, with the increased poise that came from her unique diplomatic experience. "A profound observation from one so young," she said finally. "Your father has trained you well. Dad says I'm learning from everyone. Not just him," Lena replied with a smile. "Even from difficult experiences." As the formal signing ceremony began, Solara reflected on the extraordinary chain of events her single impulsive action had set in motion. A moment of cultural blindness had nearly triggered war, yet had ultimately led to stronger protections for the vulnerable throughout known space. Perhaps there was wisdom in the human approach after all, their fierce protection of their young, balanced by an equally powerful capacity for transforming conflict into cooperation. It was a balance the Araxians might do well to study further. On the dais, human and Araxian representatives formally signed the Treaty of Meridian while observers from 15 other species looked on. A new chapter in interstellar relations was beginning, one that recognized the protection of the young as a universal value transcending cultural differences. And it had all begun with a slap, a shattered crystal, and an embassy evacuation completed in under 2 minutes. Ambassador Celarion caught Solara's eye across the room and inclined his head in acknowledgement of her presence. There was no recrimination in the gesture, only recognition of their shared role in the unexpected journey that had brought them all to this moment. Solara returned the gesture, then watched as Lena joined a group of Araxian younglings who were being instructed in a traditional Earth game. The human child moved among them with natural diplomacy, adapting her explanations to their understanding, her previous traumatic experience with their species seemingly forgotten in her enthusiasm for building new connections. That, Solara reflected, might be the most profound diplomatic lesson of all, the capacity to move beyond injury toward a better future. Perhaps it was a lesson best taught by the young themselves, as if sensing her thoughts. Lena looked up and met Solara's gaze across the room. The human child smiled, a simple gesture of reconciliation that spoke volumes about the resilience of her species and their unwavering commitment to protecting their future through their offspring. Solara found herself returning the gesture in her own Araxian way. Not all cultural differences could be bridged, but the most important values, the protection of the vulnerable, the accountability for one's actions, and the commitment to building peace, these could transcend the boundaries between worlds. In the vastness of space, with countless stars harboring civilizations of incredible diversity, perhaps that shared understanding was the most precious resource of all, more valuable than any living crystal, more powerful than any warship, more enduring than any treaty. And it had begun with a mistake. A moment of crisis that could have led to war, but instead opened the door to a deeper peace. In the complex dance of interstellar diplomacy, sometimes the most significant steps forward came after a stumble. As the ceremony concluded and the assembled dignitaries broke into informal groups, Solara found herself approached by Admiral Rachel Hale, whose fleet had withdrawn from Meridian 7, but whose influence on interstellar relations remained substantial through the newly established Family Guard liaison protocols. "Former Ambassador," Rachel greeted her with the crisp formality of a military officer. "I understand you've been instrumental in implementing the cultural education components of the Accord. I have tried to ensure that what I learned through error, others may learn through education." Solara replied carefully, still uncertain of her standing with this formidable human. Rachel nodded approvingly. The best commanders I've known were those who could transform their mistakes into doctrine that prevented others from repeating them. You have that quality. Coming from the architect of the fleet that had nearly reduced Meridian 7 to rubble, Solara recognized this as high praise indeed. Thank you, Admiral. I have come to believe that our greatest diplomatic challenge is not establishing what divides us, but recognizing what unites us despite those divisions. Well said, Rachel agreed. Though I must admit, I prefer when those recognitions don't require deploying 42 warships. There was a glint in the human's eye that Solara was learning to recognize as humor, another cultural nuance she had failed to appreciate before. As do I, Admiral. As do I. Across the room, Marcus watched his daughter and sister with quiet pride. The diplomatic crisis had been the most serious test of his career. Yet it had ultimately strengthened, rather than weakened, the bonds between species. More importantly, it had established a principle that would protect countless children, human and non-human alike, for generations to come. A successful outcome from an unpromising beginning. Ambassador Solarian commented, joining him. Your daughter shows remarkable aptitude for one so young. We have high hopes for the exchange program she has helped establish. Lena has always understood instinctively what some diplomats never learn. Marcus replied, that relationships matter more than protocols, and that how we respond to difficulty reveals more about us than how we behave when all is well. A wise perspective, Solarian agreed. One that the hegemony is still learning to appreciate. The family guard concept has prompted much discussion among our leadership. Marcus smiled slightly. The idea that family bonds might transcend official duties? Precisely. It is not our traditional approach. Yet there is something compelling about a system that places personal connection at the center of its diplomatic and defense structure. Humans have always believed that what we will fight for reveals what we truly value, Marcus said. And there is nothing we value more than our children. As the gathering continued, the newly signed Treaty of Meridian was formally transmitted to all member worlds of the Galactic Concord. Its Child Safeguard Accord would be implemented across known space within the year, establishing universal protections that transcended cultural differences and species boundaries. And on Meridian 7, where a momentary crisis had nearly sparked war, human and Araxian children played together under the watchful eyes of their elders, a living embodiment of the peace their parents had nearly sacrificed but ultimately strengthened through an unexpected journey of cultural understanding. The embassy that had evacuated in under 2 minutes 6 months earlier now stood as a symbol of transformation, a place where mistake had led to growth, where conflict had forged connection, and where the protection of the young had been recognized as a principle that could unite even the most different of species. As night fell on Meridian 7, the stars visible through the station's viewports seemed to shine with new promise, each one potentially harboring life that might someday join the growing community of worlds committed to protecting their future through their children. It was, Lena thought as she gazed upward, the most important diplomatic lesson of all, that peace was not merely the absence of conflict, but the presence of shared values strong enough to withstand the inevitable misunderstandings that arose when different cultures met among the stars. And if those values began with the simple principle that no child should be harmed, regardless of species or origin, well, that seemed like a foundation solid enough to build upon for generations to come. With the Treaty of Meridian now officially in force, and the Child Safeguard Accord implemented throughout the Galactic Concord, a new era of interstellar relations had begun. Born from crisis, strengthened through accountability, and dedicated to protecting the future through those who would one day inherit it. And it had all started with a slap, a shattered crystal, and an embassy evacuation completed in under 2 minutes.